Hi again and welcome back to Music Director Online. I'm Rob Parrish, and on this channel, it seems, I have covered most of the subjects for music directors involved in musical theatre. If there are some subjects yet to be discussed that I've missed, then do let me know. Hope you're all getting back to working with your groups and societies following the pandemic. Here in the UK, it seems to be slowly getting back to normal, whatever normal is. And as things are getting back to normal, I have a production that I'm working on at the moment that is involving me recording quite a number of click tracks to use with a small band. And as such, I'm spending a lot of time in front of my computer and Dorico. Now, I'm sure many of you will have worked on notation software, and Dorico is the latest kid on the block, so to speak. And I'm loving it. This video isn't about notation software, but as I've mentioned it, I worked for over 15 years with Sibelius, but got fed up of the endless problems that product has. You know, the Facebook group for Sibelius users is just full of complainers and people having endless problems with the software, plus complaints on the pricing structure. So last summer, I made the switch finally to Dorico and have not looked back. The Facebook group for Dorico actually has questions rather than complaints and has many positive comments and some very helpful members. Now, I'm not getting paid for Dorico, but I just wanted to sing its praises. Anyway, as I'm working on these band parts, I got a message from the YouTube channel entitled Fountain Chain 126. He only has one video on his channel, and that's a fitness video. And by his accent, sounds as though he comes from the Highlands of Scotland. I can't use his name as he doesn't give it. Anyway, Fountain Chain 126 wrote, "Great channel, thank you very much, Fountain. Can you do one possibly on how to prepare band parts in advance of band call rehearsal, marking up band scores, how to organise cuts, inserts, additional arrangements, etc." So then, in answer to the question, and before I go any further, do take a look at this video, which covers some of the subjects already, such as marking up your score. It includes a lot of detail to ensure you are prepared in readiness for the band call. Also, this is a video specially dedicated to running the band call and covers more of the points being asked about. Let me start by how I plan and organise cuts in the music. The most important thing is to ensure that any cuts are musically sound. By that I mean they are at the end of a phrase or a section and they cut to the start of a sensible section or a key change. I've had cuts made in bands I'm playing in that may be 3 bars into an 8-bar phrase and then cut to the 4th bar or another 8-bar phrase in a different key. Madness. So make sure they are musically correct and at a natural point to aid the transition. Now, I wanted to show you an example of that, but which show do I choose to show an example of how I make cuts? After thinking long and hard, rather than choosing a really modern show or a really old show, I chose something kind of in the middle with a well-known song included. Let's take a look. So the example that I've chosen is from Music Man's 76 Trombones, in the hope that it's a relatively well-known number. Now, although it might be a well-known number, it is quite a short number. This is only actually about 8 pages long, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages long, and it finishes. And then it goes into the ballet, music number 12. Now, in this particular example, if I was being asked to make some cuts, perhaps it's the choreographer that said to me, look, we haven't got a very active company, so let's cut this ballet down by I don't know, 50%, let's say. Now, one thing I mentioned earlier about being musically correct, particularly with key changes. Look at this. Fantastic. This starts with a 4-bar drum solo, and in fact I think on the following pages here we have a 19-bar drum solo. Now drum solos are fantastic from getting from one key to another without having to worry about any kind of modulation. So in this particular instance, this particular number is going to go through 4 different key changes. It's going to go through 4 different time signature changes, all useful places for making any particular cuts. So we could use that and then play over into the 6/8 time, or we could start at the 6/8 time. Then over the page it's actually going to go from F major into A flat major at this point. We could actually, if we wanted, just use the last 16 bars before we're into the applause segue. We could actually start there. So this is a good example of lots of musically correct places to start making cuts. So then, and going back to the question, as far as additional arrangements and inserts are concerned, first I have to point out that if it's a licensed production, you shouldn't be using any additional arrangements or inserting any additional music, but I'm sure you didn't mean that. So it's completely up to you how you manage this. If you're experienced in using notation software, then it's usually easier to write out the parts from scratch. And of course, you're free to make any changes that you want. Don't, however, fall into the trap of adapting any score and subsequently all the band parts to fit the abilities of your group. If you do that, you're asking for trouble. Some years ago, I played keyboards in a band for a well-known musical. I'd better not say which one it was, or it might identify the production. Anyway, as keyboard players, it's expected that you can just fit in all the instruments that isn't in the band or couldn't be afforded. True? Yeah. Well, thankfully for this particular production, it was only piano and strings that was required. However, during the rehearsal process, the somewhat inexperienced MD had constantly made changes to the score to fit the abilities of the performers. I.e., he'd constantly been changing the keys of songs. And in doing so, in one particular male-female duet that changed key mid-number anyway, one of his changes was by adding 2 bars so that Rob could get us into the new key before we carried on. Well, that was one instruction too many, and I didn't make it clear enough in my own score as to what the intention was, and at dress rehearsal I missed the key change. What happened was that I played on, the rest of the band stopped playing and was looking at me while I played solo. I did the rest of the number on my own, and guess what? The soloist sang in the original key without any problem. Now, the reason I'm telling you this story is that making numerous changes is asking for trouble. Firstly, for heaven's sake, cast your production with performers that can sing the role. And secondly, keep any such cuts or changes to an absolute minimum, if at all possible. Remember, it's usual that the band only has one rehearsal with you as the MD before they are into the dress rehearsal and then in front of an audience. But of course, it's rare one would play a show without some minor changes. And the question I've been asked is, how do I prepare the band parts with those instructions of those changes? Well, I don't. Let me explain. If there are more than, say, 5 cuts or other changes to a score, I would type up a Word document and list all the changes quoting music numbers and bar numbers, cut after bar X to the start of bar Y, etc. Send that list to your band members prior to the band call. I don't like to get involved in making changes to individual band parts. Not only is it very time consuming, but there's a much stronger psychological reason for this. If the player themselves makes the changes to his or her part, they are much more likely to understand it and mark it in a way they prefer and in a way that is clear to them. Understanding your own instructions is far easier than interpreting someone else's. Then, as an additional reinforcement of the change, before we play the number at the band call, I would go through the change again, highlight it and make sure it's fresh in everyone's memory. One player who was due to be replaced with a deputy at some point during a fortnight's run of a production once said to me, while marking up his score at a band rehearsal, he said, "I'm marking this in a way I know John prefers it to be marked." That clearly indicates to me that everyone is likely to mark changes in a different way, a way which is much clearer to them. So then, keep any changes to a minimum, let musicians mark their own part because they're much more likely to remember it, and dump Sibelius and get Dorico. I'm going to get in trouble for saying that, aren't I?